With a Hindu, a good thing to consider doing would be to have a Yeshu Puja. The word Puja in Hindi means worship, and so to have a Yeshu or a Jesus Puja would mean to have a Jesus worship service. This is a great idea because one of the biggest obstacles for Hindus is the concept that in asking them to follow Jesus, you're asking them to leave behind their family or leave behind their culture. And so what we want to do is we want to show Hindus that it's absolutely appropriate to worship Jesus in a culturally relevant way. And so we're going to walk through sort of some of the elements that we would use to do that and what it would look like to do a Yeshu Puja with your Hindu friend. Now, one thing is it's nice to have a table. Like you see, you want to have the elements elevated off the ground, and so that this table can just be 2 or 3 inches off the ground. This is actually a box top covered in a tablecloth. But just anything that keeps them off the ground. I've even used a piece of newspaper before. As long as it's not touching the ground, you're fine. It's good to put some flowers. These aren't mandatory, but they add some decoration. Maybe it's sort of like putting flowers in front of the altar at church. Just sort of provides something pretty to look at. Another element you see here is a metal plate in the middle of the table, and on that plate you would put, this is called a diya, a lamp basically. It has oil in it, and a wick. You could use a candle if you wanted to in North America. These came from India, but you could use a candle if you wanted to. Also would have an incense holder, and again you could use one of the wooden kind where it would hold the incense horizontally. This kind will hold the incense more vertically. Put the incense in there like that. And we'll get started. Let me tell you a little bit about this diya. A Hindu would light a diya before they would do a puja ceremony for any one of their gods. It doesn't really matter what god it is, so the diya isn't associated with any particular god, but it's also a very appropriate element in worshiping Jesus. We know that Jesus said that he was the light of the world, that whoever believes in him won't walk in darkness, but will have the light of life, and that he calls us to be the light of the world. In fact, even commands that you wouldn't take a lamp and put it underneath a bowl. Instead, you take a lamp and you put it on a stand, and it would give light to everyone in the room. And of course, as Jesus spoke about a light and a lamp, he was talking about an oil lamp that would have been very similar to this lamp. Incense, another very common element for Hindus. They would light incense anytime they were going to have one of these pujas, but incense is also a very common biblical item. And so in the Old Testament it was used in the temple, and incense would be offered to God to be a sweet aroma, a pleasant fragrance to him. The worship of the Israelites was to be sweet and fragrant, and the incense was to represent that. Or in the book of Revelation, the incense represents the prayers of the saints. And so we would explain to our Hindu friends that we want our worship, in Hindi our bhakti, to be pleasing to God. We want, as we pray, as we sing, as we are in his word, that our time with him would be a sweet fragrance to him, just like the incense is a sweet fragrance. Another thing that would be a common element of a puja would be some sort of chant. Now, typically this would be Sanskrit, and there's a very famous chant that Hindus will chant that basically begs that they want to know truth. They want to be moved from untruth to truth. They want to be moved from darkness to light. They want to be moved from death to immortality. It's called the Asatoma mantra, and it really echoes the words of Jesus himself as he says that I am the way, and I am the truth, and I am the life. It's an appropriate prayer to pray to Yeshu, that we want to have truth in our lives. We want to have light. We want to have immortality. So we'll chant that together. Asato ma sadgamaya, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Asatoma. Another element that would often be a part of a puja would be a coconut. Hindus will take the coconut and they will take them to the temple and they will actually break them in front of the temple. Again, no matter what deity they're worshiping, the coconut has nothing to do with any particular idol, but whatever god the Hindu is worshiping, they will break a coconut in that god's honor. And we find the coconut to be a really valuable symbol in explaining who Jesus was and what Jesus did. You know, if you think of the coconut, it's not a very attractive fruit. It's brown, and in India it'd be covered in the fur. They've ripped it off since we're in North America, but it's not very pleasing to the eye. And the same thing with Jesus. There wasn't anything about his appearance that set him apart from other men. He appeared to be a normal man, but what we know is he absolutely wasn't normal. There was something very special on the inside. As you think of Jesus' life, there was pain and there was suffering. Imagine the loneliness that Jesus felt in the last days of his life as every one of his friends betrayed him and abandoned him, and he was taken away in the middle of the night to be tried at night so that people would tell lies about him and falsely accuse him of things that weren't true about him. And then for him to be hauled away and beaten and mocked and taken to trial before Pilate, and the crowds cried, "Crucify him, crucify him." And then ultimately for him to be sentenced to beatings, harsh beatings. So there was pain involved in his life, and then sentenced to death. Sentenced that they would take 2 pieces of wood and they would nail these pieces of wood into a cross, and Jesus would carry his own death instrument up a hill. And when he reached the top of that hill, they would take his body and they would nail his body to this cross. And as he hung there, the blood poured out of him. They put a crown of thorns on his head, and he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He was in such pain and such agony. So as we open the coconut, what we see is it is pure and white on the inside, just as Jesus is pure and white. And as we come to him, he can make us pure and white. And that though we have sin in our lives, he can remove that sin. He can give us the purity that he had. We know that he was beaten and he was murdered and he died, but he came to life again. And he came to bring us life. And he came to give us purity for those who will put their trust and their faith in him. Another thing Hindus would do is to sing, to worship Jesus through song. Hindu style of singing would be called a bhajan. And I love the bhajan style of music. It's responsive, so the singer will sing a line and then the congregation will repeat the same line in the same way. So we'll sing a bhajan called Nam Lio Re. Nam Lio Re, Nam Lio Re, Yeshu ka mangal kare, Nam Lio Re, Nam Lio Re, Nam Lio Re, Yeshu ka mangal kare, Nam Lio Re. You could also play an instrument. This instrument is called a manjira. I think you could buy them even at a music store in North America, those little cymbals you clang together. Very simple. You can also just simply clap your hands if you prefer. Nam Lio Re, Nam Lio Re, Yeshu ka mangal kare, Nam Lio Re. We used the coconut to tell the story about Jesus' life in this Yeshu Puja, but it would also be appropriate to tell a Bible story. You'll notice that my Bible is in a cover. That would be appropriate to not keep the Holy Scriptures on the ground, have them in some sort of cover, but maybe we would just tell any other Bible story from the Bible, and then even discuss the teaching of that Bible study, what we learned about God, what we learned to apply, what we learned about ourselves. It would also be appropriate to pray in this setting, to ask your Hindu friend what's going on in his or her life, and what you could pray for him or her. Hindus find this very meaningful. You could even pray together. We find it helpful maybe to lead Hindus in very simple prayers. God, I praise you for. God, I praise you because. God, please provide us with just a simple sentence that maybe your Hindu friend would repeat after you. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9 that he was a Jew to the Jews, that he was weak to the weak, that to those who were under the law, he was as one who was under the law, and to those who weren't under the law, he was as one not under the law, that he does all things so that by all possible means some might be saved. That's really the concept of the Yeshu Puja. We want to take the message of Christ and the truth of the gospel and put it in a relevant Indian Hindu form. We want to make Jesus accessible to the Hindu. And so the Yeshu Puja is a way for us to step out of our comfort zones, to reach our Hindu friends and to show them that Yeshu, that Jesus is one who is relevant within their culture also.